For more on this story, we can bring in Mariam Tokhadze, a program advisor of Georgian Center for Strategy and Development. Thank you very much for speaking to us on France 24.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Zurabishvili then maintains that she's the only legitimate president. So what happens next?
Yes, Salome Zurabishvili does maintain that she remains the only legitimate authority in the country, which means that she is the only authority that has been elected through a legitimate process of elections. The installing of the new president happened under the circumstances of near absence, I would say, of legitimacy of the parliament, which was then tasked with installing the new president. I mean, the new president was, and I'm using the word installed strategically because this was not an election. He ran as a sole candidate and was essentially installed by his friends within the one-party parliament. So the parliament itself lacks legitimacy, lacks recognition from both the internal audience as well as the international audience, which then sort of by extension means that the candidate imposed by or installed by that parliament lacks legitimacy. So what happens next is a logical question, and this is something that the outgoing president, Salome Zurabishvili, tried to cover in her remarks earlier today in front of the presidential palace. She indicated that, once again, that this will be a long process of resistance and that she will now move to sort of the side of the people, and she will continue to fight along with the people. It's a long process, and it will require a lot of leadership from her, from other political leaders as well. But one thing I think that everyone is preparing for is a long process of resistance.
You mentioned it just there about how Kavelashvili was installed. That's because the Georgian Dream Party abolished the use of popular votes to elect the president in 2017, changes to the constitution. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Of course. I mean, the reduction of the presidential power has been a sort of a gradual thing in Georgia, which has its explanations and it has its reasons. There's historical sort of experience that we've had with the presidency in this country. So that's one thing. And then this year was the first time ever that the president of Georgia was to be elected by a specially designated body that was essentially is supposed to be formed by the members of the parliament as well as other institutions. But the parliament in itself is supposed to be a representative body, which is unlike what we have today, which is a single party institution. The candidate that was nominated and now installed was, I mean, honestly, as a citizen of this country, it breaks my heart that I have to say this now, but this man was selected for one quality and one quality only, which is essentially loyalty to the regime, loyalty to to Bidzina Ivanishvili. We understand that constitutionally speaking, the president does not hold that much of a power, but at the same time, within the limited powers that the president could exercise for the benefit of the democratic process in Georgia, with this man in this position, we have essentially no expectation that he will ever even dream of ever going against the general sort of party will and the party will directed by the Bidzina Ivanishvili.
Right, and we can see there on the screen, I mean, protesters have taken to the presidential palace this Sunday, and protests in general have shown no sign of letting up in all of this. We've already heard of accounts of beatings on opposition politicians and journalists, so can we expect a wider crackdown if these demonstrations continue?
That's a great question. I mean, in some ways, I think, well, first and foremost, yes, the protest is very active and nobody intends to go home anytime soon. I mean, these people protesting there, they have been out there for a month now. The weather conditions have been horrible and nothing seems to scare the people, not even the water cannons, not even the rubber bullets, no gas, nothing, no pepper spray seems to be scaring them. It's a commitment that these people have made to the democratic process in this country, which then means that not many things can scare you when that's what you are defending, essentially. We did see a number of violent acts. I mean, the way the peaceful protests were dispersed in and of itself, that was extremely problematic. And then you had, as you mentioned, a crackdown on not just on the opposition leaders and the politicians and of course the media, which is a terrible problem in itself. But we also have the unfair arrests of the participants of the protest who in many cases had absolutely nothing to do or very little to do with even what you could remotely call violence during the protest. So what can we expect? I mean, a number of us, I think, expect a little more authoritarianism, especially in the face of the newly imposed sanctions on Bidzina Ivanishvili. It's just it seems to be the logic of how authoritarianism sort of consolidates in the face of sanctions. We do expect some of that, but at the same time, I mean, the protest itself it's very difficult to discredit. It's very difficult to find things sort of against it because it is in and of itself peaceful and it has very clear demands. The demands being new election and the unconditional sort of freeing of the people that are unjustly and unfairly imprisoned.
Right, so the United States said that it would sanction the billionaire founder of the Georgian Dream Party, as you mentioned, Bidzina Ivanishvili, but he's not even an elected official. So why is he described as the de facto leader of Georgia?
He is the founder of the Georgian Dream, and he is essentially the drive behind the Georgian Dream. He is the honorary chair of the party, and essentially every decision that the party makes directly derives from him. So he is at the heart of every process and every decision that comes out of the Georgian Dream.
And will these sanctions have a significant concrete effect, or is it just about the message that this move is sending?
Thank you for that question. That's a loaded question, and I think there's a lot to be considered here. First and foremost, I think there's mixed feelings regarding the sanctions because sanctions in themselves tend to have mixed effects, right? First and foremost, there's a part of the society that is overwhelmingly sort of excited about the sanctions, as they seem to hope that it will have a sort of terminating effect on the regime. There's the other group of people that are perhaps a little more cautious in their expectations in relation to the sanctions, as I said, sanctions in some cases tend to cause a little more consolidation of the authoritarian practices. And we do expect that to happen. You can feel that there is this lingering expectation of the incoming Trump administration in the United States. As we know, the sanctions were now imposed through the executive order of the President Biden. So I think on the side of the Georgian Dream supporters, the expectation is that the decision will be changed essentially by the Trump administration. There's a lot of moving parts here, and I will admit that a lot does depend on the incoming Trump administration. The Georgian Dream has truly very obviously over-relied on their message of the supposed sort of understanding that they have with the incoming Trump administration. I think this has led a lot of their supporters to believe that things are very certain for them in the future. And I will say that there are times when it has felt that perhaps there may be some sort of an understanding between the Georgian Dream and the incoming administration in the US. But then there are times when it's very obvious that the regime here seems to just be over-relying on something that they may not have all that much substance for.
All right, Mariam Tokhadze, thank you very much for your analysis. We'll have to leave it there. Mariam Tokhadze from the Georgian Center for Strategy and Development.